When the news broke that Phil Robertson had taken his last breath, his family braced themselves for grief, but nothing prepared them for what followed, because the man who spent his life preaching simplicity, discipline, and unwavering faith left behind a farewell far more emotional and complex than anyone expected. In the months leading up to May 2025, Phil's health declined rapidly after his early-stage Alzheimer's diagnosis became public in December 2024. What many assumed would be a slow fading instead turned into a devastatingly fast unraveling, as the once unshakable patriarch began losing not only memories but physical strength. At first it was small things, misplaced items, repeated questions, long pauses, but soon it became full moments of disorientation, stories left unfinished, days forgotten, and a growing silence where strength once lived. By April, the family could no longer shield the truth, and on the Unashamed podcast, Jace quietly admitted, "He's not good. We're making him comfortable," words that told the world what they had been living with for months. Despite the decline, Phil remained calm, having spoken openly about death for years, always insisting it was not an ending but a transition, often telling his children, "Don't cry when I die, dance, sing, but don't cry," a request none of them could honor when he passed peacefully at home on May 25, 2025, at the age of 79. The funeral was private and simple, just as he wanted. No cameras, no press, only family, prayer, and memories, but it wasn't the service that broke them. It was the day after, behind closed doors in a lawyer's office in West Monroe, when Phil's final wishes were revealed. What they expected to be a routine reading of a will became an emotional reckoning, as Phil had left handwritten letters for each family member, written in his own shaky but unmistakable hand, filled not with legal language but confessions, apologies, blessings, and guidance. His estate, estimated between $10 and $15 million from Duck Commander, Duck Dynasty, books, and speaking, was carefully divided, but the money itself wasn't the shock, it was the meaning behind every decision. Miss Kay received full ownership of the family estate they had built together from nothing. Alan was entrusted with Phil's lifelong religious writings. Jace and Jep were given shares in Duck Commander along with the responsibility of guarding tradition. Phyllis, the daughter Phil discovered late in life, received land and a handwritten apology for the years she lived without knowing her father. Willie, the son who carried Duck Commander into mainstream America, inherited the controlling stake in the business with a message that simply said, "Protect the faith. Protect the legacy." As each letter was read, the room fell silent, because they realized Phil's final days weren't just about dying, but about preparing his family for life without him. To understand why those letters carried such weight, the family had to look back to where it all began. Long before fame, when Phil was a poor boy from Louisiana, raised in deep poverty where hunting wasn't recreation but survival. Though gifted enough to become a starting quarterback at Louisiana Tech ahead of Terry Bradshaw, Phil walked away from football because it interfered with duck season, choosing freedom over fame. In 1972, he turned that freedom into Duck Commander, carving calls by hand while Miss Kay stood beside him through years of hardship, faith, and sacrifice. When Duck Dynasty exploded in 2012, bringing massive fame and controversy, Phil didn't change. His blunt faith-driven views sparked backlash, suspensions, and national debate, but he never apologized, believing he answered only to God. Behind the scenes, however, few knew the darker chapters of his life. The alcoholism, anger, and years when Kay held the family together through prayer while Phil spiraled. His eventual Christian conversion rebuilt his marriage, his family, and his purpose, shaping everything that followed, from the business to the books to the Unashamed podcast, where even in his final months his convictions remained clear despite the disease stealing pieces of him. When the family finally understood the will, they realized the fortune he left behind wasn't the true inheritance. It was the redemption that built it, the faith that carried it, and the responsibility now resting on their shoulders. Phil Robertson's death marked not just the loss of a father, but the end of an era, and as Duck Dynasty prepared to return in summer 2025 without his physical presence, His influence remained everywhere, in the letters, in the business, and in the values he demanded they uphold. The family cried not because of what they gained, but because they fully understood what they had lost, and what Phil had trusted them to protect long after he was gone.